Hey guys, Parfax here, and today we're talking all about attributes. All right, let's get started. All right, so today we're talking all about attribute points. So what I did was I did a little bit of testing. I had a video about 2 years ago that I did the same thing, but we've had a lot of changes since then, and I wanted to see if anything had changed. I had somebody comment on a video not that long ago, and they mentioned, hey, I appreciate you doing this video. And I thought, well, I want to make sure that it's still correct. So I went ahead and did some testing, and I'm going to show you how I did that now. So what I actually did was when I came over here to test, we did it one of a couple different ways. So first, we're going to go ahead and go to our attribute points. I'm on the Rapier currently, and this was the last test that I did. You can see we are 1 point short. On the dexterity or the Rapier here, it's not a big deal. 1 point's not going to make a difference. But we tested a baseline, which was 350 of whatever the main stat is for the weapon. And then we went all the way up to 500 in that single stat, and then we split it up in the case of the Rapier. We did, and you can see this test right here that I ended up with. We did test a few other things just to make it a little bit interesting, see if you can possibly put a few extra points into a piece of gear, see if that'll help you out. So how I did it was we'll go over to the weapon tree. You can see here we took everything out of here just to make sure that we don't have any extra empowerments or any other weird damaging things. We just want to test base damage. We did the same thing with the fire staff, which was of course our second weapon that we tested. And the test that we did is actually just a basic attack. Now for the Rapier, we didn't do a bunch of attacks. We are just going off the single attack, non-crit. Well, there we go. Single attack, non-crit. You're going to see it's going to attack for the same thing as long as it doesn't crit every single time. So that's what we tested. We did the same thing for both the weapons. Not going to bore you with too many of the details. We're going to go ahead and get into the little spreadsheet and just talk a little bit about it. All right, first, let's talk about the fire staff here. So with the fire staff, we took a baseline of 350 intelligence, and we did a basic light attack non-crit for 2,293. Now through here, we did have a powerful honing stone on, so it is going to inflate the numbers. So if you go and get a 725 hoplite staff like I have, you might see a little bit lower number than here, but it was on the entire time. So we're really just looking at these percentages on the right hand side. So when we put 50 points of intelligence in, we went up to 2409, and we have a 5.1% increase. Now I didn't go ahead and round double decimal points. I just rounded basically to the first one. We put it there. That's why they're all zeros. That we didn't get lucky enough to get something that even, but so we just went ahead and rounded it. So we get a nice little 5% increased damage, which you're going to see down here is actually better than putting 50 extra points into your dual stat weapon. We put an additional 50 points in, and we got 4.2% increase, an additional 50 points in to get to 500 intelligence. We cannot go over 500 intelligence, and we got an additional 3.6% increase. Now, I did do one interesting little test here, which is 450 int and 50 dexterity. Now, if you go and look at your dexterity tree, you're going to see that the dexterity tree has 5% base damage while at full health. And of course, we weren't getting attacked, so we were always at full health. And we do have a 5% critical hit chance. Both these are actually pretty good, and having these is a benefit, but we'll talk here in just a second whether I think it's worth it or not. So when it comes to the 450 int and 50 dexterity, we actually get a 3.9% damage increase. Now, this isn't an increase from the baseline. This is just an increase from 450 int. We have 50 points to spare, and we put it in the int/dexterity, so put it in the dexterity. Now, do note that when you do this, you actually, in a way, gain 5 attribute points. So we only had to put 45 points into dexterity because, again, you start with 5, and we could actually go 455 intelligence. Now, you can obviously put those into con because those 5 intelligence points aren't going to make a difference, but I wanted to do as evenly test as possible. We already have an extra 5 points, so I just put the next 45 points into dexterity because I didn't need to put 50, and we had the extra 5 points in intelligence. So this is very nice. If I was going to go a 500 int build, I think this is probably the way I would go. Yes, you are going to lose a little bit of base damage when you're not at full health. If you're doing a dueling build or something like that, maybe it's not worth it. We're going to get that nice little damage bonus, but we're also going to get that 5% increased critical hit chance. The fire staff definitely wants to crit. It will be able to, unless they are a heavy armor user using the artifact that gives them critical hit protection, we are going to do extra damage with crits. We have some passives that synergize with critting. So this would be something I would do. If I was going to run only 450, which is basically what my war build is, I don't know if I would go down to 400 int and 50 dexterity, because we are going to get that little bit of increased damage, but we are getting that crit chance. So maybe I'll play around with it and get back to you guys to see if I like it better or worse. It is something to think about. If you stay health all the time, might not be a big thing. Now, when it comes to Rapier, which is a lot more interesting, for the most part, the fire staff, you can just shove as much intelligence in it. That's all you're going to do. You could do strength as well. The 25-point strength test gives you 5% light attack damage. Then the 50 gives you the 10% heavy attack damage. I do way more damage with burns in my actual abilities, so I don't really worry about that too much. So Rapier, we have a few more things down here that we tested. We have a baseline of 1775. We put 50 points into dexterity, and we got a 4.8% increase. An additional 50 points into 450 gave us an additional 4.1. The next 50 points gave us 3.5. So definitely a little bit different here. It dropped off not as steep, but it didn't start as high. So if you're going to do like a dexterity bow rapier build, just note that you're going to get a little bit less here at the very top, but giving 0.3% isn't a big deal anyway. And if you're running bow, you're probably not running, well, we'll talk about that here in a second, whether you're actually running something different or not. So now let's get to the more interesting part. So when you see the 50 in here, what we're talking about is we always are having the baseline as 350 dex. That is not going to change. So we have 350 dex with 50 int. And now look at our damage. We went up 8.3%. This is something very similar to what we saw a while back. There was a few other anomalies that are different now than then. It looks like they've kind of corrected the code a little bit here. But we have an additional 50 points, gave us the 8.3%. We're now going to put 100 points into intelligence, and we got an additional 7.6% damage. And then the next 50 points are going to give us 5.6% damage. Now, I did go ahead and put 25 points into strength, 135 points into intelligence. And then, of course, we have our 350 points into dexterity, and our light attack hit for 2217, giving us a 7.2% damage increase from, of course, the 350 100. Now, that is just light attacks. That's not abilities. I probably wouldn't go this at all because, yes, you do light attack, but I'd probably much rather just have it, especially when you have a dual statted weapon. And if you're not 100% sure what I mean, if you go over to, let's say, the dexterity tree, we're talking about the rapier, which is right here. You see damage scales 90% with dexterity and 65% with intelligence. Now, the damage on these are pretty crazy. Now, we are going up intelligence, so we do have 5% damage to increase backstabs. We have 5% base damage to targets inflicted by damage over time effect, and we have 10% base damage to light and heavy elemental attacks. Now, we are using a rapier, which we actually don't benefit from any one of these actual passives, which is really nice, because if you are able to get one of these, we didn't have a damage over time, so that's an additional 5% damage that we're going to get. We have 5% damage increase to backstabs and random critical hits. We didn't get a chance to actually test that at all because it's already in there. I tested non-crits. So anytime I get a random crit or backstabs, we're going to get that extra 5% damage. And if you're doing any form of elemental damage, we're going to get another 10% base to light and heavy elemental attacks as well. So this test isn't even factoring any of those. So these numbers are fairly similar to what I saw last time. There was a few other anomalies, but it really opens up a few different build ideas. Now, one thing to keep in mind, and I will just move this over here and we'll talk a little bit about the bow. I kind of hinted at it before. With the bow, because we are a single stat weapon, it is nice to kind of branch out into, maybe a few other different attributes to see if we can get a little bit extra. There's basically two different paths you could go. You could, if you wanted to, go the strength tree to get a little bit extra light attack damage. You are gonna, or you can do the heavy attack damage too with the 50 or the 25-point passive here. But I would actually keep in mind intelligence. So the first point, intelligence, again, we have the backstab and random crit, so 5% extra damage there. But we have a 5% base damage to targets inflicted with damage over time effects as well. So we do have double increased damage here. Now, is it going to, in the long run, be more damage than just pumping into dexterity? Well, we pump it pretty high, and if you look at our sheet, once you get past about 400, especially 450, then you really get a pretty big drop off and getting that 5% increased base damage, where if we're doing intelligence, this passive right here is going to proc on them a very vast majority of the time. We're going to be proccing this more than the fire staff's going to proc the 5% base damage while at full health. And we're still going to get a little bit of increased damage here with a 5% to backstabs and random critical hits. So it is something just to think about. I'm not really here to tell you, hey, you need to run this, run that. I just want to give you the numbers and let you maybe come up with some cool, funky builds yourself. All right, guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I enjoy doing these kinds of videos. I like to do builds. I want to do some PvE stuff, some all-around builds. We're going to have a bunch of things coming down the road, but I always think a video like this is kind of at least informative, and I hope you guys got at least a little bit out of it. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.